Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what is the highlight of the summit and the most anticipated session of the 3 days. We at AmCham Greece are delighted to have with us tonight the Prime Minister of Greece, Mr. Kyriakos Mitsotakis, as well as 3 exceptional CEOs and a Vice President who represent approximately $130 billion in turnover and more than 500,000 employees. 4 global level thought business leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, based on what has been presented in the first 2 days of GS 2020, it is apparent that as things are changing rapidly, the speed with which we adjust to the new conditions, the new values that are being formed, will dictate the difference between success and failure. In this moment, brought about by the pandemic, and despite the difficulties they face, businesses have the responsibility to step forward. Now that the rules of this new reality are being formulated and the new world is being shaped, the need for a dialogue between business and government is more urgent than ever. A new understanding between the private and the public sector that has a strategic meaning and where each one is called forward to fulfill its own share of the responsibility. What makes us extremely proud is the fact that we have an example of this best practice here tonight at GS 2020. We are particularly thankful and honored to have with us the Prime Minister of Greece, who with his actions and in battling the pandemic has without doubt changed the way that Greece is viewed globally. We're joined by Mr. Myron Brilliant, Vice President of the US Chamber of Commerce, the world's largest business federation, representing more than 3 million businesses. Mr. Albert Bourla, CEO of Pfizer, what else to say, the man of the hour. Mr. Calantzopoulos, CEO of Philip Morris, who is transforming the global enterprise. And last but not least, Mr. Puneet Rejain, CEO of the professional services giant Deloitte. Mr. Prime Minister, esteemed CEOs, a warm welcome. We're excited and hope to be enlightened by the exchange of thoughts and comments during this discussion. Gentlemen, before we proceed, let me allow me to just mention a few words on logistics, aka housekeeping. I will ask the Prime Minister a question, followed by 2 rounds of questions for each CEO, followed by 1 question for the PM from each of the CEOs and the Vice President. So the Prime Minister, please feel free to stop or comment at any point in time. So without further ado, Mr. Prime Minister, as I mentioned in my introduction, through your actions and in battling the pandemic, you managed to enhance the international image of Greece. What is your vision of the post-pandemic Greece, particularly as we're entering the 3rd century after the Greek Revolution?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And I have very fond memories of the previous time I spoke to the Chamber exactly a year ago, at a time when no one could anticipate how turbulent 2020 would be. My hope is that this pandemic, with all the pain and suffering that it has caused, will be a dramatic catalyst for change. And my obligation is not just to deal with the urgent task of making sure that we address as effectively as possible the 2nd wave, but also not to lose time and make sure that we continue to implement an aggressive reform program that will make Greece an extrovert, competitive country that will play a leading role in the twin revolutions that will shape our future. I'm talking about the digital revolution and I'm talking about the green transition. And I think we have done a lot of work in that direction. I am confident that once the pandemic is over, Greece will be on the side of the winners, because there will be winners and there will be losers. Yes, the truth is that we've dealt very well with the first wave. The second wave has proven more challenging for our country as a whole. But I am confident that with the right measures, we will be able to contain that second wave. But at the same time, what is of critical importance to me is to make sure that we don't undermine the productive capacity, the potential of the country, because I do expect a very rapid recovery after the pandemic is over, and the pandemic will be over once we have vaccinated a significant proportion of our population and the global population, because this is not just a Greek problem, it's a global problem. So we have to protect jobs. This is exactly what we've done. We have to provide liquidity, especially to smaller companies that don't have access to the banking sector. And at the same time, we have to create the right incentives for people to invest in Greece, because you should have no doubt, and I'm sure that the business community is fully aware of what I'm saying, even in these difficult times of crisis, there are companies that are investing and are planning for the future. How will we do that? We need to reduce the tax burden. We've done so already. We need to reduce the taxation on labor, which is our big priority for 2021. We will reduce social security contributions cumulatively by 3.9%. We will scrap the solidarity surcharge. We will make taxation on labor much more competitive. And at the same time, you are fully aware of a very aggressive reform program we are pushing through in spite of the pandemic. For example, now, as we speak, there is a very important legislation in Parliament regarding land usage, absolutely critical, because we need to be disciplined in terms of where we build and what we build, if we can envision a sustainable future. Just one example of the numerous reform initiatives that we do intend to push through even more aggressively. I think the pandemic has made us all wiser in a way, fighting with a difficult crisis, looking at our strengths, looking at our weaknesses. And if anything, what I can tell you is that today I am significantly more committed to my reform agenda than maybe I was before the pandemic. I see the opportunity, I see the need. I'm aware that there is capital available, both from the private sector, but also from Europe through the Recovery Fund. And I don't intend to waste this opportunity, essentially to transform the country. And I think we need to think boldly in terms of the post-COVID challenges. We are not going to be timid, but at the same time, we're going to put forward an inclusive agenda where we will address a lot of the grievances which essentially were at the root cause of the crisis. Issues such as income inequality. How do you bridge the digital divide? How do you make sure that you reward the dignity of work, especially for those essential workers who we now realized how important they are, but maybe they've been invisible for a long time. So all these are important priorities, and as we are totally committed in addressing what is the urgent problem of the day, which is dealing with COVID, making sure that we save lives every day, but also we're fully aware of what is the important challenge for the next day, and we have to work on both these tracks simultaneously.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. And speaking on behalf of AmCham and in relation to information that we have from companies that are interested in investing in Greece, there is more and more interest coming our way. So you're doing a good job.
We see it. I mean, we'll have a chance, I'm sure, to discuss specific business opportunities. But Greece is, it's on the radar screen. And my intention is to make sure that we punch above our weight. We have significant comparative advantages that we need to leverage, and not necessarily in sectors which are associated with Greece, for example, such as tourism. I'm sure when we'll talk with Albert, he will not just speak about the vaccine. He is indeed the man of the moment, and we're tremendously proud to have a Greek CEO leading a company that is at the forefront of finding a solution to a huge problem. But he'll also speak about how Pfizer had decided, even before the pandemic, to set up a big data analytics and R&D center in Greece. And it's not the only company that is realizing that beyond the sea and the sun and the renewable energy, what this country has to offer is incredible people. Highly talented, highly skilled, highly committed, very hardworking, and of course a diaspora that at any given moment in time is thinking about returning to Greece and will return if we offer them the right job opportunities.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Speaking of Pfizer and the investment, Mr. Bourla, it's a great pleasure to have you with us today. I'm particularly proud because we come from the same city. So if you allow me, I'd like to start my questions with you. And the Prime Minister mentioned the vaccine. So your company and a few others have announced positive results from the COVID-19 vaccine studies. Assuming the vaccines are approved, what will companies and governments need to do in order to have the larger percentage of people be vaccinated by the mid of the next year? And could Greece possibly be among the countries to produce the vaccine?
First of all, thank you very much for your question. Thank you very much for having me here. It's a great honor to be together with such an esteemed panel of other CEOs, and of course, in the presence of the Greek Prime Minister. And also, I thank you very much, Prime Minister, for your good words about Pfizer. And indeed, we are planning to increase even further our investments, and I hope I will have the opportunity to speak about it later. Now, coming back to the vaccine, I think what the government should do it is to make sure that as the vaccine is distributed to them in the beginning, in the first months of the pandemic, they will have the responsibility to distribute those doses. They will have the responsibility to select who should receive the doses first, and then who should be the second, etc. And given that the production will always be in the first 6 months less than what the demand globally. And they need to do that in a strategic way. And they need to make sure that they listen to the experts and that they are utilizing the vaccine in the way that they can minimize as quick as possible the burden population. For example, many governments are thinking that they will start with the healthcare workers, or many governments are thinking that they will start with the people that are senior and they are living in nursing homes. Everybody depends on the specific needs of the country. They will need to make sure that they design a plan that will minimize the impact. And let's not forget, even if we vaccinate a relatively small percent of the population in the beginning, we can have a very large impact, because a very small percentage of the total population contributes disproportionately to the severe cases and deaths. So if we vaccinate this part of the population in the beginning, we should be able, without developing herd immunity, to see dramatic drop in those indexes, which will allow to provide more confidence to open the economy. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say it is that the government needs to make sure that given the pressure, open the economy, should not make the mistake, because now we have a vaccine, let's relax immediately the other measures. I think it will be important that they will use the vaccine as one tool in controlling this disease. Undeniable, it's going to be likely the most effective, most permanent impact, but there will be one of them in the beginning. And the time that we'll have to go back to, we can go back to normality is not far away, but definitely is not now. So let's make sure that we don't do this mistake. And on your last question, which is if we can produce it either in Greece or in other places, it is indeed a problem, manufacturing. And it is a problem in the sense that we are living a situation that something which is very new, so we didn't have an existing manufacturing line for a vaccine like that, will be required in such global demand that it is impossible to meet. So we are doing right now everything we can to increase the manufacturing capacity that we have. But the challenge is that we need to increase it in the next few months. I feel very comfortable that by the end of 2021, for example, we'll have more doses than the world needs. But right now, we are going to have in the first months the supply. So the solution is not to try to do something from scratch, because it takes a lot of time and very specialized manufacturing technology to be able to produce an mRNA vaccine, for example, which is in our case. So right now, I believe that our focus is in the big facilities that we have engaged, how we can incorporate additional investments, how we make sure that the suppliers can provide to us enough products so that we can increase the demand, the production.
Thank you so much. Speaking of investments, Mr. Prime Minister, and reforms, it has been extremely important for Greece to exit the 301 list of the Department of Trade of the United States, paving the way for more investment. And I think this was one step just before Microsoft announced its 500 million investment in data centers in Athens. So following this line of thinking, I'd like to ask Mr. Calantzopoulos, illegal smuggling and illicit trade are the biggest problems globally for your industry. How would PMI assist Greece to tackle this problem?
First of all, good evening and thank you for having me. Thank you particularly to the Prime Minister. And as Mr. Bakatsello said, congratulations for the way the government has handled the COVID crisis. I think it's remarkable for Greece, and I was personally surprised both about the measures of the government and the discipline of our compatriots. I have to say, of course, COVID is the most important thing just now, but illicit trade in this broad term, and I hope we will not have this problem with the COVID vaccine. I think Mr. Burla is very much aware that there is danger that we have fake products running around and that we have to be very vigilant. Now, if there's anything to learn from cigarettes, clearly it requires an enormous cooperation between the government and the companies to track and trace all these products. It requires the appropriate legal frameworks, because very often when we seize contraband products, there is very little punishment. But the most important thing is change the legislation, train the customs officers, including in the most, unfortunately, modern tools, because organized crime today uses a lot of digital and internet tools. And clearly, as a company, we are willing to invest in this area, help the governments, give them the appropriate equipment where it is possible legally, and continue the cooperation with the customs and the rest of the authorities to minimize to the absolute possible this very important problem, because we need to understand that it's not about just a few cheap cigarettes. Organized crime and illicit trade have many forms, from human trafficking to weapons to terrorism, and they're all financed the same way, operate the same way. So learning from a sector where we have many years of experience, I guess it can be applied to many other areas.
Thank you so much. Speaking again of reskilling Greeks, Deloitte in Greece has made a real impact in reversing brain drain with its decision to action and establish within the crisis a competence center in Thessaloniki, focused on tech skills, which I understand that this is now employing some 400 professionals. Mr. Engen, what were the challenges and the lessons you learned in establishing and running your competence center during the last couple of years? And what are your plans going forward?
First, thank you again for having me, and it's great to be with this very distinguished panel. Prime Minister, let me add my congratulations as well. In reading up, preparing for this, it's impressive what you have done in Greece. And as the other panelists have said, it's really wonderful to be with you. Albert, congratulations. You are the man of the hour. So really wonderful to see what Pfizer and the others are doing around vaccines. We've been in Greece for 50 years, and we are a purpose-driven organization. We are committed to serving our clients with distinction, taking care of our people, but also giving back to the communities that we live and work in. And we are a people-driven organization, so we are always in search for the best talent. 2 years ago, counterintuitively, we decided to invest in Greece, as you said, to build a competency center focused on some of the technology-enabled skill sets that are critical in this economy. And it's been a remarkable success. I have to compliment the government for the incentive and for the encouragement that they've given us. But it's been a remarkable success, not only for Greece, but also for its ability to serve beyond the borders of Greece. And the Prime Minister is absolutely right. This pandemic has been horrible on multiple dimensions, but it has changed fundamentally a few things. It has reaffirmed digitization. It has reaffirmed cloud, cyber, the secular technology trend, which plays really well to this competency center that we've set up in Greece. And our plans are to grow it in a meaningful way in the next couple of years. I expect that we'll potentially double it in size. And I think it's a great magnet for the points that the Prime Minister made, which is attracting the best talent, maybe even attracting back Greeks to come and work and contribute in this new environment where digitization, cloud, cyber, some of the skill sets that embody the center are so critically important.
Thank you. The last question of the first round goes to Mr. Brilliant, our partner in the US, the US Chamber of Commerce. On the 20th of January, the new administration will be sworn in. What will the Biden administration mean for US-Greece and US-EU relations?
Well, thank you for having me here, Nico. And of course, AmCham Greece should be congratulated for having its 31st annual summit, and we're so proud at the Chamber to be a part of it. Prime Minister, I am the Executive Vice President of the U.S. Chamber in charge of the international program. It's the largest of any kind in the world today, and we're in over 50 countries through activities directly. And of course, we're so proud of our partnerships with the American chambers, including in Greece. And not too long ago, Nico and I were together with the Egyptians and others talking about the Eastern Mediterranean Gulf and the drive for energy revolution that could really change the lives of the people in your country and in the other countries affected by the fines there. Let me just take a couple moments first to tell you that personally, I was supposed to be in Greece in April with my daughter, who's 21 years old. My first name is Myron. It's a Greek name. My father's a very famous Greek historian. I say that because we've all been impacted in big and little ways by the pandemic. And the three companies represented by the CEOs here today are three members of the U.S. Chamber. Of course, I applaud Albert and Pfizer, like the others, in the fine here on the vaccines. And I think Albert laid out the challenges ahead in terms of the distribution to make sure not just Americans and people in Europe get the treatment and the vaccines, but all across the world. And that is going to be a challenge, a distribution challenge that's going to require cooperation. So let me just say a few words to the question that Nico laid out for me. I believe that, that the incoming administration, Joe Biden is someone known to many of us. He's been around Washington a long time, and his team is well known. Tony Blinken and I did an interview not more than 2 months ago in which he laid out very clearly the strong belief of the president in reshoring or strengthening the alliance with Europe. And here I think Greece is very much in the thick of it because, Prime Minister, you should be applauded for the kinds of economic structural reforms that you are undertaking. You heard Pfizer talk about the work they're doing in your country. Andre could echo that as well. And I can tell you that I'm very proud of what Microsoft is also investing in your country. And of course, to me, not just in the energy field, but in the technology field where you're catching up, there is so much here that presents an opportunity for Greece in working with U.S. companies. But the picture of where I think the Biden team and the Biden administration will go is in three buckets. First, strengthening not only our alliances with Europe in key places, but also thinking about the multilateral institutions. Yes, we need to be in the WHO. Let's be absolutely clear. We pushed back against President Trump on this issue. We need reform of the WHO, but we should be there. Two, of course, the WTO and the importance of renewing a commitment to working with the Europeans in the WTO agenda. And three, of course, the Paris Climate Accord. And I think you will find industry is united that we need to work together on sustainability goals. Now, there are opportunities. And my second point is on the EU-US front. We've got to get some early wins. There are trade irritants like the Airbus-Boeing dispute. There are other issues like the 232 steel aluminum tariffs. We need to take those out. Those trade irritants divide us and do not unite us in the ways that we need to work together with our friends in Europe. And we need to take those threats off, and I believe the incoming administration will do that. We also need to find ways to cooperate on issues that are outstanding in the U.S.-China relationship, and Europe and the United States can find a path forward. And I think there are opportunities, including in areas like investment screening and subsidy practices, and that's something that if you're more interested in, we can talk further on. But there are challenges, and I just want to be clear because as much as I embrace the EU-US relationship and, of course, our work with Greece through the AmCham, I do want to be clear-headed about some of those challenges that we face collectively. Of course, there are differences on digital policies, rather around digital localization, around privacy, around DST, that we need to have an OECD solution. And there are even going to be some challenges around sustainability. Now, in a pandemic, we need to all focus on, first, recovering from the health crisis, something that Pfizer and all the companies are focused on. Second, we need to clearly focus on the economic aspects of that recovery, utilizing like the G20. But Prime Minister, where Greece comes in is I think you have an opportunity here to continue the digitalization of your economy, to attract and encourage the inclusive growth that you laid out. And I think you will find that the U.S. companies represented here and many that are represented through the AmCham and the U.S. Chamber are committed to helping you there. But I don't want to suggest that there aren't issues that we don't have to work through, because there are some challenges. But I'm optimistic that the emphasis of the incoming administration will be to strengthen the alliance relationships with Europe. Will be a priority for sure. So I'll leave it at that, Nico.
Thank you very much, Myron. I appreciate learning this link that you have with Greece, and I will come back to this, I hope, at the end. For the time being, let me go back to Pfizer and ask, the health sector and particularly the pharmaceutical sector is changing rapidly following the technology disruption. How do you envision the pharma sector in the future, and what kind of skills would be required?
First of all, I think if we learn something from this COVID crisis, it is that the value proposition of a vibrant biopharmaceutical industry, it is fundamental for the health of the society. It is fundamental for the society itself. And the truth is that I believe that all the fundamentals right now indicate that we will have a vibrant biopharmaceutical industry. First of all, the need is clearly there. Society needs medicines because people are getting older and older, so new diseases are coming up, that we have also globally an urbanization. The middle class in the world is increasing 150 million people every year. Those are people that they didn't have access to medicines, now they have. So the demand will be extremely high in the next 2 years. On the other hand, the offer also will be very compelling because, as you mentioned before, we are at a revolution period where I will call it a scientific renaissance right now, where biology and digital are colliding, and they are unleashing tremendous potential for our ability to design new molecules, understand pathways of diseases, and provide medical solutions to the world. So, as you said, I think there are a few things that are going to be very different, though, in the new era for the pharmaceutical industry. And I will focus maybe on two that are extremely important and relevant to our discussion today. One, it is that science is very diverse. We have a plethora of scientific knowledge, but it is increased in logarithmic rates. So it is impossible anymore that the science can be developed in big academic or private institutions like the Pfizer labs or the Harvards of the world. The science, by definition, will happen in multiple locations that will include many academic institutions and will include also many biotech startups. That's inevitable. So that presents an opportunity for smaller type of players that they can now claim a seat on the table when it comes to startup of small biotech that can easily happen now in Ireland or in Greece, or high-edge technological research project that can happen in the University of Thessaloniki, where I had the honor to graduate, and not only at the Yale University, for example. So that's one. The second is that digital will transform completely this industry because it's having the potential to transform every single link of the value chain. Digital is transforming from the basic research, because now we have digital biology, and that it's helping us to design molecules and simulate with digital how they will behave in the human body. But digital also is transforming the way that we do clinical trials. One of the reasons why we're able to move so fast with our COVID-19 clinical trials, with 44,000 people participating, gigantic study, and to be conducted in a few months, was because we had developed a very critical digital infrastructure that will allow us to do that. And digital will affect also the way that we analyze the diseases. Digital will affect the manufacturing capacity. Digital will affect everything. And that's why the new capabilities that are needed are not only the traditional that we had in our industry, chemists, biologists, physicians, or engineers when it comes to manufacturing, but now we need data scientists. And one of the reasons why we created very big hubs around the world was because we are pushing a lot of resources into digital right now. And this is how also we selected Greece and Thessaloniki to be able to advance our digital hub there, which, by the way, Prime Minister is progressing very, very nicely. Despite the COVID that delayed us, we will be having 200 people working in this hub by the end of this year. And right now they are already producing. And we were extremely, I repeat, satisfied with the quality of talent that applied. And also you were right in your predictions that you gave to me also, Prime Minister. 15 to 20%, I believe, from the applicants were Greeks that were living abroad. And they had immigrated, particularly because of the crisis, and they were willing to go back to Greece and provide that they can find a job that they can utilize their skills. So as also Punit said, also I see a path right now that in a few years we will double our digital presence. But also that made us also very encouraged the success that we are having with this first try to do something in Greece in digital. And we also made the decision to open a second hub. And again, that will be in Thessaloniki in Greece. That will be a hub that will this time utilize search services. That will be professional services, but for internal reasons, for Pfizer. That will be from economical services, that will be from human resource services, that will be from call centers. And that the first stage is projecting an additional 350 people. So, suddenly in a city like Saloniki, we are having a plan of 600 people with the possibility to double it. And this is happening because we are investing in new technologies. And I believe that also is happening because we see the environment changing in Greece. It is an environment that you can feel you are welcome to come and invest. And I'm very happy that my own country is doing so well in their ability, because I know from Satya in Microsoft how they decided to come, and I used a lot of Punit's help. His Deloitte actually advised us a lot in selecting our hubs, and I can see how the global business community feel about the environment in Greece right now.
I'm certainly very happy to hear that story, Albert, and particularly thrilled that you do find the right type of people to hire. It's the same story with Deloitte, with Punit, but also with Andre. We should mention that Philip Morris has a strong presence in Greece, a manufacturing presence for their cutting-edge products, and it's exactly these stories that I'm so eager to get out to the international business community, because what had not been so well known about Greece is exactly the talent pool that we have available, and of course the access to a diaspora that is particularly well trained, has experience in working in large multinational companies, but as we know, we're all eager at some point to come home, and probably the easiest transition from someone who is working abroad to return to Greece is by working for a large multinational company. I would add that we're also adding additional incentives for those who will return to Greece. In 2021, we're going to do it in the beginning for just 1 year. Everyone who has not been a tax resident in Greece for the last 7 years, a Greek or foreigner, should they return to Greece, they will pay for the next 5 years 50% of their income tax rather than 100%. So we're giving also a big tax incentive. I know it's not the most important thing. There are other reasons why someone will return, but we really want to make a credible case to the Greek diaspora that there are now opportunities in Greece, and the more the story is known and the more you talk about your positive experience in Greece, I think the more companies will come, either to set up production in Greece, as Philip Morris has done, cutting-edge R&D, or shared services. We are a natural hub for companies that want to service the region, super connected, super safe, with lots of incentives. So even for shared services, back office work that can be done in Greece to cover other skill sets, this is also a very interesting proposition for foreign companies.
And wonderful time zone for Greece for global services, because you are having equal in the middle between the Asia and Asia and the United States, which is a very big deal.
And very good connectivity also when it comes to the Gulf, Africa. That is also
Europe.
Quite important, and of course Europe. Yeah.
At the crossroads of 3 continents, Greece is changing, and thanks to Pfizer and Deloitte, Thessaloniki in particular is being converted into a digital epicenter for our country. Speaking of transformations, and speaking of Philip Morris, as you mentioned before, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Calantzopoulos, how do you envision PMI to be in the future? And what other sectors would Philip Morris International be looking into investing?
Well, let's start from the beginning. There are 1 billion people who smoke in the world today. And we all know smoking causes disease and premature deaths. So I think the mission in front of us is for the people who would not otherwise stop, offer them products that are vastly less risky than cigarettes. And the problem in cigarettes is the fact that we burn organic matter, the tobacco, nicotine is addictive, but is not really the disease cause of cigarettes. So we have developed a portfolio of products that either use tobacco or liquids that are more known, that all have a common denominator, absence of burning, of combustion, and they all reduce the toxicity of the smoke very substantially. And our leading product was authorized as a modified risk tobacco product by the US FDA 4 months ago. So we are investing clearly in this domain, and our objective is to replace cigarettes completely and phase them out as soon as possible. For that, clearly, there is a lot of work to be done. I think we have developed the products. We've done the scientific substantiation with preclinical and clinical trials. But the biggest work in front of us is have the right regulatory frameworks and then convince consumers. And for that, I'm very grateful because Greece is at the forefront of adopting specific regulations for these products that encourage the innovation and encourage consumers to switch whilst maintaining strict controls, obviously, over these products, especially regarding youth use. So I think for anything we try to improve, the key is to convince consumers. And to convince them, you need to explain first what the problem is. I said the problem is combustion. The second is to give them possible alternatives, like in energy. We provide green energy is not zero risk. It has not zero impact, but is better than burning fossil fuels. The third is clearly have the right regulatory framework to incentivize people to move. And fourth is companies have to make the commercial investment and effort to work with the consumers. And that requires public and private sector collaboration. So obviously, like everybody else, digital is at the front right, the center of what we do, and we're all learning how to apply it. We still manufacture a lot of physical goods, but digitalization, especially as you have products that have electronics, is very important to accompany consumers during their journey. Also to know if they'll fall back to cigarettes for our case, and analyze consumer behavior so we can service them better. So I think that's the effort of the company. And obviously the objective we have is not only to be depending on nicotine or alkaloids, but as we have consumer data, we can offer them other products and services in the future. But the priority is clearly to replace cigarettes. Now, coming to Greece, Papastratos, which is the Greek affiliate of Philip Morris, has been in Greece for 90 years. So it's part of the economic and social fabric of the company, of the country, I'm sorry. And yes, we have invested in physical facilities. And actually, we had the last investment we made started in 2017 when we converted the entire cigarette factory into a 100% reduced risk product or smoke-free products facility that exports in 6 countries. And as our product IQOS grows, obviously the possibilities in the factory grow. And we're very pleased with the performance because it's a very complex product to produce, both in terms of quality, controls, and also efficiency of the production facility. And I will echo what everybody else said. Greece has a fantastic workforce, well-educated, skilled, and very street smart, which not everybody has. Clearly, and I think the Prime Minister and the government are moving in the right direction. For all investment, you need stability, you need predictability, and, an increasingly professional administration and institutions, and no red tape. And I know it's a vast program, and I hope we will make good progress as we move. But and also appreciate the fact that we don't only look at physical investment or brick and mortar in Greece, but we are moving now in the direction of using the skills and the abilities we have to be at the forefront of the digital part. And I think the green transition, I'm wondering why we have not done it so far. So I think time has to move there.
Thank you. I'm relatively close to Christos Charabandidis, who's heading Papastratos in Greece, and I have to congratulate you on how you've transformed Philip Morris. I've been to the factory, and it's really impressive. And I think that I speak on behalf of everybody here. We also thank you for the support that you've given the state during the pandemic. Perhaps the Prime Minister would like.
I would like to thank you and the company, and of course your fantastic team in Greece. You've been at the forefront of important contributions. Thinking really proactively, helping us a lot during the first wave of the pandemic, and I would like to thank you and also your Greek team. It is part, I think, of the social solidarity portfolio that any company needs to manage. But you've made your presence very much felt in Greece through your contributions.
Thank you for your very kind words. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. So obviously Greece is changing and it's attracting more investment. I would like to ask Puneet something. Greece is exiting a long recession, and the financial markets are already showing confidence to the Greek economy and, of course, the administration. We understand that the pandemic is rapidly changing the global markets and will result to a so-called new normal. In this new reality, what should be the priority of a small country like Greece in order for the country to increase its competitiveness and forge ahead?
I'd like to build on what Andre said. Actually, he answered that question really well in terms of good governance, talent, market, some of the reforms the Prime Minister is undertaking. I think those all play into it. But what I'd like to be able to do is expand on this notion of the new normal. Albert mentioned digitization. I think there's some trends that COVID-19 has reaffirmed. The first is how work is going to get done. Take Deloitte. We have 300,000 professionals globally, 800 offices. We had to take our entire organization remote in March. Now, would we go back to the way that we used to travel? Probably not. So the way that we will do work, the way that Albert will do work in Pfizer and in PMI will change fundamentally as a result of COVID. And I think that's an opportunity for a country like Greece, with increased remote work, increased flexible work. The second is around digitization, this technology-enabled transformation that is being enabled by digitization, cloud, and cyber. That is why the center that we've invested in, that Albert has invested in, comes into play. And I think that is going to be fundamentally different and a change as a result of COVID, and something that Greece can certainly build on. I think the third area is the way that business is done. Supply chains, I've spoken to about 100 CEOs in the last several months, and every one of them has talked about how they're going to reassess their supply chains. Albert talked about the way that research is going to get done and development is going to get done, ecosystems, not only in the pharmaceutical space, but in every business, are going to play an increasing role. And again, a country like Greece can play and punch, as the Prime Minister said, above its weight. The fourth and final trend, I think, is actually a silver lining as a result of COVID-19, and that is around the environment, the ESG measures. I don't think we're going to go back to the way that we used to travel, the way that we used to live. And I think there's an opportunity for us as business leaders, as country leaders, to really step up and address some of the issues that are going to plague us as a global community, climate being one of them. And I think Greece can certainly lead on that, as will a number of companies. Deloitte is going to do its part. I know that the others on this interview will do their part as well.
Thank you. To close the second round of questions, I'd like to ask Myron, what are the Chamber's priorities when you look at Europe?
So, Nico, I think there is a common theme here among the three executives, and I just want to start with just saying that, Mr. Prime Minister, what you have heard is the rapid increase in digitalization of the global economy, the impact that's going to have on the workforce, clearly the issues around sustainability and inclusive growth. You mentioned that in the outset. I would echo what Manette said about supply chains. I just got off a call with the head of the IDB, the Interdevelopment Bank, and of course, that was the theme of what they were talking about in the Americas. Everyone is under this illusion that they're going to be able to nearshore supply chain. So the first thing I would say, our priority is to make sure that the environments in these countries are competitive and that they're doing everything they can, including in your country, to continue the kind of structural reforms that you've outlined already in your agenda. We would just encourage you to continue to go deeper on that. Two, to accelerate your preparation for what is going to be in the post-pandemic world, and thanks to Albert and others, we are going to get to a post-pandemic world. But I think what I would say is I'm very concerned about the environment that we create and the battle that we all have to avoid nationalization policies that prevent the kind of sharing and exchange of ideas that is going to be absolutely critical in a community of nations that have to work to avoid the kinds of policies that we think would inhibit growth in your economy, in Europe, and of course in the world economy. So what do I mean by that? We've got to get rid of some of the trade irritants between the United States and Europe that I outlined initially. I mentioned already things like the Airbus-Boeing dispute. I would add the 232 tariffs that the United States has imposed on Europe, or I think are counterproductive to building the kind of alliances. 7 years ago, I was an advocate with President Obama's team for the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP. Now, that didn't work, but we need to be thinking about how we strengthen our trade ties and remove ourselves from the disputes and the irritants that have prevented Europe and the United States to fulfill the prospects of growth in our already strong transatlantic relationship. So that's one. Two, I've already said this. I feel like a broken record. I do think that we have to strengthen the governance of the rules of the game. There are gaps in the WTO system. Part of that is on the failure of the United States and Europe to lead here, and part of that is on the failure of other countries to accept the necessity to upgrade the WTO. What do I mean by that? Areas like industrial policy, subsidies, certainly in the intellectual property area. These are things that have to be addressed if we're going to level the playing field and create the best conditions for growth, inclusive growth. I also believe that we have to recognize in this regard that climate is not an issue that can be in isolation. We all believe in sustainability and the opportunities that it provides in commerce, but frankly, we've got to agree on what that means. We got to agree on what the rules of the game are going to be, and they can't be discriminatory in nature. And this is an area where we still have a lot of work to do. And finally, I would just say that since we focus so much on digital issues, I just really believe that we have to define what that means when it comes to data privacy, when it comes to taxes, when it comes to e-commerce, when it comes to the nexus between national security and commerce that we see in the U.S.-China debate. We need Europe and the United States to be thought partners and leaders in evolving and developing the rules of the game in these areas that are right now not really covered, not only not by the WTO, but are really being independently defined in ways that perhaps undermine confidence in the business community, do not provide certainty that we need. I see it time and time again in the conversations I have with the Chinese leadership and with other governments. And Prime Minister, would just echo something that has been said already. We want Greece to succeed. We want Europe to succeed. And we want the United States and the business community in the United States to be advocates for strengthening the alliance at a time when the world is fragile, when there is huge debt, when there's huge social issues, when there is big questions looming around environment and sustainability, and of course, big questions about not leaving people behind as we accelerate the digitalization of our economy. So these are all issues on the minds of executives. I could go on. I'll stop there. Nico, and turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Myron. Mr. Prime Minister, when we were putting together this conversation, we had asked our 4 business leaders to, at the end of the second round of questions towards them, to pose some questions towards you. So if you don't mind, we'll start in reverse order. Myron, would you like to go first?
Well, I mean, I have a question that's, I think, on all of our minds. Mr. Prime Minister, you have talked about the fact that your country has done a pretty good job in managing the health risks from COVID-19, and congratulations on that. But there's an economic challenge for your country. And the question I have for you is, one, how do you feel you're doing on the economic side? And you mentioned it earlier, but what are the areas that you feel that you need the help from the business community on? And 2, how is the coordination within Europe? I mean, we follow very closely the Brexit talks between UK and EU. I know you do as well. As I was on with the Irish Taoiseach not too long ago. How are you viewing yourself in working with the European countries in trying to ensure that growth is restored across Europe, and therefore growth is restored across the world, with Europe being a strong partner? And then in that regard, what are the lessons that you think we should all take from your experience and the experience you have with Europe as a whole? A lot there for you.
Well, we know that 2020 is going to be a very bad year for all European countries. I expect Greece to be, probably in the average of Eurozone countries when it comes to the recession. But the question really is, how do we plan for 2021, and what are the prospects in a post-COVID world? And what are our comparative advantages as we move forward? As a country, I think what is very important is, first of all, the fact that we've earned the credibility of the capital markets. We're currently borrowing at record low interest rates. And there is a general belief that in spite of our big stock of debt, the combination of the liquidity provided by the ECB in conjunction with the fact that this is a credible reform-oriented government makes investors extremely comfortable. We saw it in the in the debt markets. We're also interestingly beginning to see it in the Greek equity markets. Now, on top of that, what is absolutely critical, and this touches upon your second point, is the fact that we did agree, after 5 extremely painful days and nights, to a very important, a massive, I would argue, a step in the direction of Europe being able to borrow as a supranational entity and then channel grants and loans to those countries that need the funding the most. I'm talking about the package that was agreed last July. As you know, there's still some complications in terms of approving the budget for the next programming period, but I don't expect that Poland and Hungary will at the end be obstacles to what was a momentous moment for Europe. So I think Europe stepped up to the plate. It did deliver. We were one of the first countries to submit an aggressive set of projects for what is called the RRF, the Recovery and Resilience Fund. So for the first time, I feel confident that apart from mobilizing private capital, there's also access to European money to fund and support these big transformational projects that we're currently planning. So we know 2020 is going to be very ugly in terms of the recession, but my number one priority is to make sure that I keep jobs alive and that jobs are not destroyed during the crisis. Let me give you one example how do we do that. When, for example, we give smaller companies access to liquidity. And we're doing it because we know that the banks can't do it. So we directly give money to the companies in the form, partly in the form of a grant, partly in the form of essentially a loan to be returned over time. We tell them, look, if you want to have access to this funding, you have to guarantee jobs for the foreseeable future. So this comes with some strings attached. We want to make sure that once we recover, the productive capacity of the economy hasn't been severely damaged. And I think when I look at the job numbers so far, I think we've done a reasonably good job in protecting jobs as much as we can. So we know we have the firepower at the European level. We are significantly progressing when it comes to cleaning up the banks and the non-performing loans within the banks, taking some important decisions along the lines, but this is also a project that is moving in the right direction. So if we manage to address the three main strategic tasks that were outstanding when we took over the country, the first is change our fiscal policy. This was a necessity in the post-COVID world. We're all encouraged and we are spending more, but we need to spend smartly. Making sure we address the supply side of the economy through real and meaningful structural reforms, all the issues we touched upon, while at the same time cleaning up the banking system. I think we probably have addressed the main challenges that will allow the next decade to be significantly better than the previous one, which, as you know, was pretty traumatic for Greece overall.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you, Myron. Puneet, would you like to go next, please? But gentlemen, please feel free to jump in and ask the Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, you've heard all of us talk about the post-COVID new normal, and some of us outlined the 3 or 4 things that will change the way work is done, the way business is conducted. Assume that you agree with that, but you also talked about Greece punching above its weight. So in this new normal, what specifically would Greece do to punch above its weight?
Well, let me touch upon the point that you raised, because it is of critical importance to me. COVID has demonstrated that you can work from anywhere. If that is the case, and I think it will be a case to a great extent, then why not choose to work out of a place that is beautiful, safe, offers excellent quality of life, we have access to good healthcare, but is at the same time connected, close to your major markets. So I want to make Greece, the best place not just to visit, but to work from. I want to make Greece the best place to retire, should you choose to spend, your winters, not your summers, if you're a Northern European, in a Mediterranean climate. So this perception of Greece as a destination, but not just for tourism, a destination for work, for investment, for people who will choose to retire. I think we have a lot going for us in that direction. And it's interesting how many people, even during the pandemic, chose to actually spend their time in Greece and work out of Greece because they saw the overall proposition that the country has to offer. So I think that if we combine our natural comparative advantages, one of them being, our geographic location, the beauty of the country, with making sure that we don't fall behind, but we lead in terms of the trends that you have identified, I think we're really onto something. And when it comes to digital, let me just highlight 2 examples which I think are particularly important. The speed with which we've moved services that were traditionally done through physical contact to the digital world through our site gov.gr. This was a revolution for Greece, but people are so enthusiastic about it. They suddenly realize that their life can become so much easier. So the digitization of the state as a vehicle to break down silos and bureaucracy is for me a major proposition. But also look at education. We currently have every single Greek classroom, every single, from kindergarten to high school, on digital classrooms. Nobody thought that this could be done a year ago, but we've done it. Obviously, there's no substitute to classrooms, but it is the second best option that we have. And not only that, it is also an opportunity to teach our kids, especially our younger kids, that the interface, the knowledge interface, is not just going to be a teacher. It will also be a computer with a real presence behind it. And we had a lot of complaints. Oh my God, how are the kids going to adjust? Well, I can tell you, usually it's the parents that complain more, because obviously I understand the pain of having to stay home with the kids. But the kids are adjusting, and this has, in spite of, and with the difficulties of COVID, it has been a big success. And all my thanks to the teachers who embrace this and who are leading digital classrooms, 100,000 digital classrooms per day in Greece. And of course, we will keep schools as closed for as long as the experts tell us. But even when we get back to physical teaching, we know that we have the infrastructure now to deliver digital education should we need to do so. But I do believe that, in spite of what people say, and I listen to the concerns, and I'm very much, I speak to a lot of, child psychologists, about how difficult it is to be at home. I also do recognize that the skills and the knowledge and the concentration that you need when you interact digitally is something which will be required of the kids as they grow up. I mean, a kid who's now in first class of elementary school, they will graduate from college in 2032, from high school in 2032, and from college, if there is still a 4-year college concept, in 2036. So we're forced to think in terms of these skills.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. Mr. Calantzopoulos, would you like to ask the Prime Minister?
Yeah, sure. Mr. Prime Minister, we have a lot of discussion about, and we represent large companies that work in many countries. But at the end of the day, the essence of the economy of a country is small and medium-sized enterprises. And my personal view is also that Greece has a lot of opportunity, Greek enterprises in Africa, Southeast Asia, and many of the developing countries. Is any particular attention on your side on this, or how you can incentivize or open up a little bit, these countries and these markets for the Greek enterprises?
Thank you for the question.
Of course, private sector has to invest, but
I have lots of thoughts on that. First of all, we need to increase our share of exports. That is, one of our key goals. Goods and services. We need a much more open economy. And I do need to point out that manufacturing has a role to play in Greece. You know it quite well because you're producing cutting-edge products in Greece. So this is not just a service-oriented economy. And a lot of Greek companies, manufacturing companies, have become much more resilient during the crisis. And actually, we managed to increase our exports during the pandemic in absolute numbers, which means that there's a base upon which we can build. We have completely redesigned our foreign economic diplomacy on two fronts. First of all, encouraging companies to invest in Greece. We mentioned, the Microsoft project, the Volkswagen project, where we're taking an island, the island of Astypalea, and converting it into an electric mobility island from scratch, making sure we look at all aspects of the way the island is functioning. But we also want to encourage Greek companies to move abroad. And not just export, but establish a presence. We were very present, as you know, in the Balkans. We suffered a decade of retrenchment, but now we're very active again. It's our natural neighborhood. But I see also opportunities. I see huge opportunities in Africa, especially Eastern Africa. Africa is an unexplored continent for us. We're going to be putting a lot of work in making sure we open up economic channels to Africa, but also the Middle East. We have just signed a strategic partnership with the United Arab Emirates. We do consider them a strategic partner. There's a nexus of countries that think alike. Israel, UAE, Cyprus, Egypt. We share the same geopolitical concerns, but there are also huge economic opportunities. And again, not just for our country, for inward investment, but for us, making sure we conquer their markets. I went to see the beautiful big mosque that was built in Abu Dhabi, it's built exclusively with Greek marble. And of course, the other big challenge for us is India. I think India, we're the closest country to the subcontinent, the closest European country, except for Cyprus, to the subcontinent. Huge potential. We are a 6-hour flight from Athens to Mumbai, so technically not even a long haul. India is a market which, as you know, has huge potential, huge opportunity also for Greek companies to move into that market.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you, Mr. Calantzopoulos. Mr. Boula, last question.
Oh, thank you. First of all, let me add to what you were saying, that COVID has taught us that we can work from any place, and why not from a lovely place like Greece. I myself did it during the COVID. I stayed a month in Greece. Now, 1 week was vacation, but the other 3 weeks were work. And some of the most important decisions for the COVID-19 vaccine, for example, were done while I was here, and my team all over the world, basically, not only some in Germany, some in UK, some in United States. So I think it does work, and I think it's a very good direction that Greece can take. Now, when it comes to my question, Prime Minister, we know that a big issue for the Greek economy traditionally has been the productivity of the public sector and the inability to modernize it. And this is important not only because it costs a lot of money to the taxpayers, but also because it can affect the productivity of the private sector, because the bureaucracy can many times be the brake to people that would like to move faster and smarter in terms of investing. What is your assessment about where the Greek public sector is right now in terms of modernization, and how optimistic you are, or what do you plan to do to make it better?
When we took over the government, Albert, we looked at the Doing Business Index. We were very practical. We said, where are the big challenges, and how do we need to work to improve our ranking? But these are real changes. This is not just a marketing trick. So we identified various areas. The first is, I already spoke about, digital connectivity. How can people, especially small businesses, do their work digitally? And let me just give you an example. When we handed out the last cash grant to small businesses, applications were submitted on Monday, and on Thursday, money was paid into the accounts of businesses. Obviously, of course, this all requires a digital infrastructure. There's the HR component of the public sector. I think there are a lot of civil servants that have done a tremendous job during the crisis. And I hate this dichotomy in Greece, sometimes between you and I have spoken about this, which is false about, the productive private sector and the public sector that is sort of not as productive. I've met so many civil servants that are doing a tremendous job, but they need more incentives, they need to be assessed, they need proper performance assessment, and they need proper HR management to deliver even better. On bureaucracy, I think we've done a very substantial job to reduce barriers, especially when it comes to licensing. We focus a lot on these issues, and we have made significant progress. And we know that when it comes to big investments, strategic investments, we will smash through any bureaucratic obstacles. That's the way we did the Microsoft investment, and we have a task, a team at the Ministry of Development that is in charge of making sure that sometimes we have to go case by case to solve problems, and if need be, we will do that. There is one big outstanding challenge which we haven't yet addressed to the extent that I would like, and that is justice. We need greater speed in the decisions of justice. We have made progress, but that is a big long-term structural reform that we still need to address. But I come from the private sector. I always want to put myself in the shoes of a CEO who has to make a decision and choose between Greece and other countries. We are all competing, and countries are competing, and we have to be competitive, and we have to make a compelling case, and we have to deliver. It can't just all be talk. We sit here, we have a lovely view of the Acropolis. I remember so many stories of, businesses and CEOs coming to Greece. Their first dinner was always lovely with a view of the Acropolis, and then everything unraveled because we couldn't deliver. So I'm very much focused on delivering results. And the more success stories we have, and the more we have you you personally, your panel, but the panel, the wonderful panel that we have, telling the story of a country that is changing, the more momentum we will create, but the more pressure on us to move even faster. As I said in the introduction, COVID has only made me more convinced that we need to double down on reforms. So if people think that we'll push on the brake pedal, they're wrong. We will push on the accelerator pedal much faster to deliver the changes that this country needs.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you, Mr. Bourla. I think this closes...
Can I just jump in for one quick thing? Just one quick thing. Prime Minister, I just want to make two quick suggestions. One is, look, you've got a compelling story that you're building on. I think you need to go out and tell that story. Obviously, COVID is a more difficult environment. We're using virtual. But, obviously, we will encourage you to use our network in the United States, which includes not only the businesses, but 3,000 chambers and 1,100 trade associations. If we can help you get your story out, we'll do that as part of your narrative. The second point, though, is I do think you need to be very clear what those incentives are. We talked about regulatory issues, we talked about digitalization, but one of the things we have not talked about is just the kind of incentives that you're trying to provide in different sectors of the economy to encourage investment. We've talked about 2 or 3 investments in particular, but I would encourage that story to get out as well.
Oh, I could talk a lot about that. It would take up much more of our time, but
I know.
we will make it absolutely clear to your members. Plus, let me just conclude by saying 2021 is going to be an important year for Greece. As you know, we're celebrating the bicentennial of the Greek Revolution, and hopefully, at some point in 2021, we'll get done with COVID, and it will be an opportunity for us to reintroduce Greece to the world. But not the Greece they sort of remember from their history books, but a modern, vibrant, confident country that relishes on taking on the challenges of the future. So thank you for the offer. I'll make sure I follow up on it.
Thank you both. I think this brings our discussion, which was indeed the highlight of the summit, to a close. I'd like to thank everybody. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I'd like to thank you for your leadership of the country during the pandemic, and for having a plan and also a conviction to follow the plan and modernize and reintroduce Greece.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of you. I'd like to thank you, Myron, for your friendship and your partnership at the U.S. Chamber. And we might take you up on what you said about perhaps setting up a Greek-U.S. summit, business summit, when perhaps the Prime Minister comes to Washington for a visit. And I'd also like to thank Puneet, Mr. Calantzopoulos, and Mr. Bourla for trusting and investing in Greece, particularly Mr. Calantzopoulos and Mr. Bourla make us extremely proud. Being Greeks, leading these global giants, we're really proud and very thankful to have you with us today. Mr. Prime Minister, you know that Greeks have this knack. They always try to find something Greek, some Greekness in whatever we come across. So I was thinking of how we could link Greece to our 4 panelists, and I didn't know about Myron's link, the name Myron, and also his father's relation to Greece. We have 2 Greeks, and then I was thinking of how we would link Puneet. And then the head of Deloitte in Greece told me that Alexander the Great had reached the part where in India, the part where Puneet comes from. So there's something to link Greece with everybody. Thank you all. This has been tremendous, and this brings the second day of the summit to a close. Thank you all for being with us, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow at the summit. Have a great night. Stay safe. Thank you.